What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Watch It in Action. I'm BouseFeenux, and this is the Tonkor. Pretty neat, huh? The Tonkor is an amazing weapon that you guys have been asking me to do a video of for a while now, and I'm super excited that I've finally gotten around to it. For those of you that don't know, the Tonkor is a grenade launcher in Warframe capable of decimating large groups of foes and is the favorite weapon of many players. It features innate blast damage, a very high critical chance, and great critical multiplier stats. Because it would be extremely OP otherwise, the Tonkor does have its fair share of downsides, including a very small magazine size and only 2 rounds, a heavy arc to the shots that you fire, and pretty horrible accuracy, all of which can make missing shots painful, meaning that you should pick your shots carefully, or sport one of these awesome Terminal Velocity Zephyr builds that you're seeing here. This is a weapon that I think deserves practice to use effectively, as you'll definitely need to get used to the arc the projectiles have. But if you can master that, you'll have an extremely solid weapon of mass destruction on your hands. Let's take a look at how to build this thing. Alright guys, so here we are at the mod screen. Couple things to cover first. The Forma investment here is going to be about 6 Forma. A lot of the builds that I've seen are at least 5 or 6 Forma. To really make this weapon great and to be able to use a couple different things, because this weapon is one of those weapons that doesn't just have one set build for it. I actually myself use this for a couple different things, so having this extra polarity space in here really helps me out when I'm experimenting with different builds for this weapon and using it for different Warframes. The other thing that you might notice that looks a little out of place here is this symbol right up at the top. That's actually the lens that I'm using. I'm using a Naramon lens on the Tonkor, and once you start getting lenses, you can equip them to weapons in Warframe to gain focus, and that's something that we'll cover in another video, but that's just something that I wanted to answer in case any of you had any questions or wasn't really sure what that was. So anyway, talking about the mod setup here, this is a very, very common rifle crit build. Nothing really super out of the ordinary here. The Tonkor does count as a rifle when you're building it, so like all your mods are going to be rifle based. It is a launcher still. It will pick up sniper rifle ammo or aka launcher ammo. It won't use rifle ammo, but it does use rifle mods, so that's really nice. We get a lot of the different rifle mods here, so we can build it like a crit rifle, which is super awesome, because then we'll be able to get this 87% crit chance, and even higher with an Argon scope, which is something that we'll talk about here in a second. But taking a look at the mods here, we've got split chamber. This is going to give us our multi-shot, allow us to shoot multiple grenades, which is really nice, especially if you miss one of them. The Tonkor does have really bad accuracy, so sometimes these grenades will split really far apart. Which is really nice. I use this weapon as a close range weapon. I don't use it as like a long distance thing because the arc for the weapon is too low. Unless I'm using Zephyr with a terminal velocity build, I really just am using this weapon up close. So that's why I've chosen heavy caliber on here. It's going to give us an extra boost to damage. It's like having a second serration on here at a cost to accuracy. But if we're up close and personal, that's not really going to matter all that much. So I think heavy caliber is a good choice for this weapon. Point Strike and Vital Sense are going to be our crit mods. That's what's going to give us this 87% crit chance and the 5x multiplier. Really nice to have those on there. I'm pretty sure that most people would agree with me and say that these 2 mods are essential for the Tonkor. I don't think anybody doesn't build the Tonkor as a crit weapon. So the other 2 mods I've got on here, Infected Clip and Stormbringer, these are just my elements that I'm using. You can swap these out to anything you want. You can use gas, you can use corrosive, you can use, radiation, magnetic, whatever. You can use whatever you want, and you're always going to have this innate blast. This puncture damage here is when the grenades actually connect with an enemy, which is really interesting. The grenades have their own physical damage type before they explode. Kind of cool. It's kind of like the Securapenta, where the Securapenta has some impact damage whenever the grenades actually hit something. Neat. So if you actually score a hit on something, it's going to explode anyway when they hit an enemy. But you get a little bit of extra puncture damage in there as well, so you get the physical damage with the blast damage, making this a really good candidate against armored targets. So you get all that damage in there. But anyway, guys, this is pretty much the build here. The last thing on here, this mod can be switched out for a couple different things. I would definitely suggest never, ever, ever using punch through on your launchers. If you want to laugh at yourself for a few seconds, this is kind of hilarious to put punch through on your launchers and watch the grenades just pass through enemies and not explode. Don't ever use punch through. I know I use punch through on everything. thing, but this is not one of the weapons to do that on. One of the things you can do is you can swap this out with a physical damage mod if you really want to, although I think that's a terrible idea. You can use piercing caliber to up this puncture damage, but honestly, I would rather just you go with the third elemental. Or one of my favorite things to do is throw an argon scope on here, because as this is a explosive weapon, a lot of times the shots you get when you hit an enemy, it's going to count as a headshot. So what that's going to do is this argon scope is going to put us into red crit territory very reliably, and we're not even going to really have to aim for headshots, which is super, super nice. So these are really the two builds that I use most often. I use the Terminal Velocity with my Zephyr, and then when I'm not using Zephyr, I'm typically using Argon Scope. Sometimes I'll even use the Argon Scope with the Zephyr. It just depends on the situation, and I'll show you guys both of those. Let's hop on over to the Simulacrum, and we'll show you both of these builds in action. Alright guys, so first up we're going to be using the Argon Scope build against some heavy corrupted gunners at level 100. I'm using these guys just so you can see what this weapon does against some supremely tough enemies. Notice that in the top right hand corner, seemingly no matter where we hit an enemy, our Argon Scope buff keeps refreshing. That's one of the fantastic things about explosive crit weapons and Argon Scope. As long as you can hit the target, you'll pretty much get your buff. Also, I want to point out how quickly these guys are going down, and that our red crits are pretty reliable. And lastly, the big problem with this weapon is that if you miss, it's going to be pretty painful, as those grenades won't explode on contact, and they actually have a very long fuse time with this build, and we have a pretty lengthy reload time between shots if we aren't using fast hands. So that could open up some problems for you, but the biggest thing is just try to be accurate, try to be close, get in and get those shots, and make sure they're connecting with enemies, and you should be okay while using this build. Next up, we'll be showcasing the Zephyr Terminal Velocity build. Now, please note that this build requires a specific Zephyr build, and you can find the video I put together for it in the description below. This build essentially solves a few of the Tonkor's accuracy, flight speed, and projectile detonation problems, as with this setup, your Tonkor grenades will pretty much fly straight with increased speed and little drop-off in terms of arcing. As an added bonus, you'll notice that the Tonkor grenades explode when they come into contact with any surface, not just an enemy. The issue with this build is that we do lose the Argon Scope, which will cause us to lose a significant amount of damage, but honestly, this thing is so powerful that it only really matters if you're facing extremely high-level enemies, and sometimes it's really nice to have a few utility options over just straight damage. Alright guys, and that pretty much does it for today. Thank you for watching. Again, this was another episode of Watch It in Action, and we covered the Tonkor today. I'm BouseFeenux, and if you liked this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe below. That really helps out the channel. I've got some really awesome things planned for the future of this channel, and I can't really do it without your guys' support. And just in a short amount of time, we've already climbed to almost 6,000 subscribers, so this is really exciting for me. I can't wait to make the next video, and I will see you guys at the next one. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good one.